There's a bottle in your kitchen right now, probably sitting right next to the stove, that you've been told is good for your heart. Maybe your doctor mentioned it. Maybe the label says heart healthy. Maybe you switched to it years ago specifically because you were trying to do the right thing. And I want you to know, that decision made complete sense at the time. The information you were given was everywhere. It was official. It was repeated so many times that questioning it felt almost irresponsible. But here's what's actually happening. The science that led to that recommendation, a lot of it was flawed. Some of it was funded by the very industry that profits from you buying this oil. And more recent research that went back and reanalyzed the original data, tells a very different story. The oil I'm talking about is canola oil, and if you use it, or any of the industrially processed seed oils, soybean, corn, sunflower, the generic stuff labeled vegetable oil, this video is for you. I'm going to explain what these oils actually do inside your body, why the heart-healthy label is misleading at best, and what to use instead. Let's get into it. So let's go back to where this whole thing started, because this isn't just a story about oil. It's a story about how a single flawed idea became official health policy and ended up in your kitchen. Back in the 1960s, a researcher named Ansel Keys put forward a hypothesis. His idea was basically this: saturated fat raises cholesterol, and high cholesterol causes heart disease. So if you swap out butter and animal fat for vegetable oils, which are lower in saturated fat, your heart will thank you. That idea got picked up by the American Heart Association. It got worked into government dietary guidelines, and food manufacturers ran with it. By the 1980s and 90s, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, they were everywhere, marketed as the heart-smart choice. Here's what almost nobody talks about, though. There was actually a massive clinical trial conducted in the late 1960s called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment that tested exactly this. They took over 9,000 people and replaced their saturated fat with vegetable oil rich in linoleic acid. Same calories, more heart-healthy oil. And yes, their cholesterol went down. That part worked. But here's what's critical. The people who switched to vegetable oil did not have lower rates of heart disease death. They didn't live longer. The data didn't support the hypothesis. And the truly troubling part? That data was never published at the time. It sat in boxes for decades. It wasn't until 2016, when researchers at the National Institutes of Health went back and recovered those old records, that the full picture finally came out. Published in the BMJ, and the conclusion was stark. Lowering cholesterol with vegetable oils did not translate to lower risk of dying from heart disease. Let me say that again, because I want you to really hear it. They lowered cholesterol. That part worked. But the people eating more vegetable oil still died at the same rates, or higher. Now, does this mean everything we know about cholesterol is wrong? No. Nutrition science is complicated, and there are researchers who push back on this study for fair reasons. But at minimum, it should make you ask, what is this oil actually doing inside my body? Because clearly, the story is more complicated than lowers cholesterol equals healthier. And this is where it gets real. These oils, canola, soybean, corn, generic vegetable oil, they don't start out in the ground looking anything like what ends up in that bottle. To extract the oil at industrial scale, manufacturers bathe crushed seeds in a chemical solvent called hexane. Then the crude oil gets refined, bleached, yes, bleached, and deodorized at high heat to remove the color and the smell that would otherwise make it unpalatable. By the time it reaches your shelf, it's a highly processed product stripped of most of its natural compounds and loaded with oxidized fats from all that heat exposure. And here's the part that worries me most. Not just as someone who looks at this research, but as someone who thinks about what this means 20 years down the road. These oils are extraordinarily high in omega-6 fatty acids. That's not inherently bad. You need some omega-6. But your body is supposed to maintain a balance, roughly equal amounts of omega-6 and omega-3. For most of human history, we ate something close to that ratio. Today, estimates suggest the average American is eating anywhere from 15 to 25 times more omega-6 than omega-3. And that imbalance, That chronic systemic skewing of the ratio drives inflammation. Not the kind of inflammation where something hurts and swells up for a week. Chronic, low-grade inflammation. The kind that quietly damages blood vessels. The kind that shows up in your arteries before you have any symptoms. The kind that, over years and decades, sets the stage for the very heart disease you were trying to prevent by switching to this oil in the first place. I've talked to people who've been doing everything right for years, eating low fat, using their canola oil, getting their cholesterol checked, and then something happens, a calcium score, an unexpected diagnosis, and they're blindsided because nobody told them that the advice they were following might have been incomplete. I'm not saying the oil caused it, but I am saying the full story deserves to be told. The good news, and there is good news, is that this is fixable. And that's exactly what we're going to get into now. So now that you know what's in that bottle and what it's actually doing, let's talk about what belongs in your kitchen instead. Because this isn't about cutting out all fat. Fat is essential. Your brain needs it, your hormones need it, every cell membrane in your body is built from it. The goal isn't less fat. The goal is the right fat. And the single best swap you can make, the one with the most evidence behind it, the one I'd tell my own family to make first, is extra virgin olive oil. Now, olive oil has been around for thousands of years, and I know that sounds like a line from a wellness blog. But stay with me here, because the research on this is actually exceptional. There was a massive clinical trial, one of the largest dietary intervention trials ever conducted, called the Pre-Dimed Study. Over 7,000 people at high cardiovascular risk. They split them into groups. One group followed a Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil, another group got nuts, and a control group got advice to eat low fat. They followed these people for nearly 5 years. The group using extra virgin olive oil had about 30% fewer major cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, cardiovascular deaths, compared to the low-fat group, not 5%, not 10%, 30%. That is enormous. That's the kind of number that stops a trial early because the ethics board says you can't keep withholding the intervention from the control group. And why does olive oil do this? A few reasons. It's high in oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat that's stable, that doesn't oxidize easily, that doesn't create the inflammatory cascade we were talking about earlier. It's loaded with polyphenols, plant compounds that actually reduce oxidative stress in your arteries, and it's about as far from an industrial solvent-extracted product as you can get, especially when you're buying extra virgin, cold-pressed. Now, okay, let me be precise here, because this matters. Not all olive oil is the same. Light olive oil or regular olive oil on the label has usually been refined, which strips out most of the polyphenols. You want extra virgin, and you want to use it the way Mediterranean cultures actually use it. Drizzled over vegetables, used in salad dressings, cooked at moderate heat. It's not as fragile as people say at normal cooking temperatures, but if you're searing something at very high heat, we'll get to the better option for that in a minute. So, extra virgin olive oil, that's your everyday oil. The one you use most. That's the foundation. The second swap, and this one surprises people, avocado oil, especially for high heat cooking. Avocado oil has one of the highest smoke points of any natural oil, around 500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also predominantly monounsaturated, similar fatty acid profile to olive oil, and it's incredibly stable under heat. So if you're roasting, searing, or doing anything that needs a really hot pan, avocado oil is your friend. Just make sure you're buying 100% pure avocado oil. There are a lot of products on the market that are blended with cheaper seed oils without making it obvious on the front of the label. Check the ingredient list. One ingredient. Avocado oil. That's it. And then there's butter. Real butter. Preferably from grass-fed cows. And I know, this flies in the face of what a lot of you have been told your whole adult life. But this is where the original hypothesis really starts to fall apart. Butter contains short and medium-chain saturated fats that your body actually processes very efficiently. It contains fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K2, that are essentially absent in seed oils. Grass-fed butter in particular has a favorable omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and it contains a fatty acid called conjugated linoleic acid that research has linked to anti-inflammatory effects. Is butter something you should eat in unlimited quantities? No. But a tablespoon of real butter on your vegetables or eggs is not the cardiovascular time bomb you've been told it is. The evidence for that fear was always thinner than it was presented. And look, here's the thing worth saying clearly. You're not going to see butter being promoted by a food industry that profits from selling you processed seed oils at massive scale. Butter doesn't have a trade association running ad campaigns. Canola oil does. So to recap what belongs in your kitchen: extra virgin olive oil for everyday cooking and dressings, avocado oil for high heat, and real butter for finishing, baking, or just cooking your eggs in the morning. 3 oils. That's really all you need. Now let's talk about why this swap is more urgent than most people realize. This is the part most people never hear. And I think it's the most important part of this whole conversation. Because we've been focused for decades on cholesterol as the villain, the number on your blood test, the thing your doctor talks to you about at every checkup, and cholesterol matters. I'm not dismissing that. But the cholesterol story, on its own, is incomplete. And this is where it gets real. Here's what's actually going on. When you eat these seed oils, canola, soybean, corn, sunflower, the linoleic acid in them gets absorbed and incorporated directly into your cholesterol particles, the ones circulating through your bloodstream right now. And here's the problem with that. Linoleic acid is a polyunsaturated fat, which means it has multiple double bonds in its molecular structure. Those double bonds make it chemically unstable. It oxidizes easily, meaning it reacts with oxygen and essentially goes rancid inside your body. So now those cholesterol particles are loaded with this unstable, easily damaged fat. And when the linoleic acid oxidizes inside the particle, it warps the particle's structure entirely. Researchers call this oxidized LDL. And that modified version is a completely different beast from the normal kind. Your liver can no longer recognize it. Instead, immune cells in your artery walls, macrophages, try to engulf it. And when those immune cells get overwhelmed with more than they can handle, they transform into what's called foam cells. Foam cells are the foundation of arterial plaque. That's the actual starting point of atherosclerosis. Researchers James DiNicolantonio and James O'Keefe laid this out in a paper published in Open Heart, peer-reviewed, thoroughly referenced, describing what they call the oxidized linoleic acid hypothesis of coronary heart disease. Their argument, backed by a body of research, is that it's not cholesterol in isolation that drives arterial damage. It's this corrupted, structurally altered version of it. And one of the primary things that determines how vulnerable those particles are to that corruption is how much linoleic acid is sitting inside them. More seed oil intake means more oxidation-prone particles. More of those damaged particles means more foam cells. More foam cells means more plaque. Now, I want to be fair here, because nutrition science is genuinely complicated, and I don't want to overstate the certainty. There are researchers who push back on this hypothesis. Some controlled feeding studies have not found a significant rise in these damage markers from higher linoleic acid intake. The science is still evolving. What I can tell you is that this mechanism is biologically plausible, it's supported by a growing body of evidence, and it raises serious enough questions that it deserves to be part of the conversation, especially when the oils in question have only been a major part of the human diet for about 70 years. And here's what makes this particularly sobering. Research on U.S. adipose tissue, that's the fat stored in your body, has found that levels of linoleic acid have roughly doubled in Americans over the last half-century. Doubled. Your body stores what you eat. And linoleic acid from seed oils has been accumulating in American body fat at an accelerating rate, tracking almost exactly with the rise in consumption of these oils since the 1960s. Think about what that means. This isn't just about what you ate yesterday. Your tissues are a record of decades of dietary choices. If you've been cooking with these oils for 20-30 years, and most people over 50 have, this fatty acid has become part of the structural fabric of your cells, and that stored linoleic acid is available to keep oxidizing, keep driving inflammation, Keep feeding that quiet, invisible process in your arteries, even if you stopped eating seed oils tomorrow. I don't say that to discourage you. I say it because I want you to understand what is genuinely at stake here. This isn't about cholesterol numbers on a piece of paper. This is about whether your arteries are quietly hardening right now while you feel completely fine. Because that's how cardiovascular disease works for most people. It builds silently, for years, for decades, and then one day something happens, a heart attack, a stroke, and people say it came out of nowhere. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It was building the whole time. The person who catches this early, who makes the swap, who brings down the chronic inflammation, who stops feeding that process, that person has a very different trajectory than the one who doesn't. I've seen both stories, and I want yours to be the first one. So with that in mind, let's talk about the last piece of this, the practical steps you can take starting this week. Okay, so let's bring this home, because information without action is just anxiety, and the last thing I want is for you to close this video feeling overwhelmed or like the damage is already done and there's no point. That's not where this ends. The swap itself, the actual kitchen change, is one of the easiest dietary upgrades you can make. You're not overhauling your entire life. You're replacing one bottle with a better one. That's it to start. So here's what this looks like in practice. First thing, go to your kitchen right now, or after this video, and look at what's in there. If you've got a bottle of canola oil, vegetable oil, corn oil, soybean oil, or sunflower oil, that's what we're replacing. Toss it or use it up and don't buy it again. Replace it with extra virgin olive oil for everyday cooking. That's your primary oil, the one you reach for most. And then pick up a bottle of avocado oil for the times you're cooking at higher heat. Those two oils will cover probably 90% of everything you cook at home. Now, and this is the part people often miss, the bigger challenge isn't actually your home kitchen. It's everything outside of it. Seed oils are in almost every processed food on the shelf. Crackers, chips, salad dressings, mayonnaise, frozen meals, granola bars, protein bars, the ones marketed as healthy, even. If you flip them over and look at the ingredients, you're going to see soybean oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, or some combination of all three. They're cheap, they have a long shelf life, and food manufacturers love them for exactly those reasons. Restaurants are the same story. Most restaurants, fast food, casual dining, even a lot of nicer places, cook in seed oils. It's just the economics of running a kitchen at scale. So if you're eating out regularly, that's where a significant chunk of your seed oil exposure is coming from, and there's limited control you have over that. What you can do is reduce it at home so thoroughly that your overall intake drops meaningfully, even accounting for what happens when you eat out. Start reading ingredient labels, not for calories, not for fat grams, for the type of oil. If the first fat source listed is soybean oil or canola oil, put it back. Look for products made with olive oil or avocado oil or no added oil at all. This takes about 15 extra seconds per product, and it adds up to a significant change in what you're actually consuming over time. And then there's the omega-3 side of the equation, because this isn't only about removing the seed oils, it's also about restoring balance. Remember that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio we talked about? The way to bring that back towards something healthy isn't just reducing the omega-6, it's also adding more omega-3. Fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring. These are the real food sources. If that's not realistic for you, a high-quality fish oil supplement is a reasonable option, and flaxseed, chia seeds, and walnuts give you plant-based omega-3s, though they're not as bioavailable as the fish sources. This doesn't have to be perfect from day one. Actually, let me rephrase that. It shouldn't be perfect from day one. Perfection is how people burn out and go back to their old habits 2 weeks later. What works is picking the 2 or 3 things that feel most doable and starting there. For most people, that's swap the cooking oil, start reading ingredient labels, add fatty fish once or twice a week. Those 3 things alone will meaningfully shift your fatty acid balance over time. And here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. The decisions you make in the next few months aren't just about how you feel this year. They're about who you are at 70, at 75, at 80. Whether you're the person who can travel, stay active, be present with the people you love, or whether you're managing complications that started building quietly, right now, in decisions that felt invisible at the time. You now know what most people don't. You know why the label says one thing and the biology tells a different story. You know what to swap and you know why it matters. The next step is just deciding to actually do it. Check the oil in your kitchen today. One decision. Start there. And if this video changed the way you think about something you've been doing for years, if it filled in a gap that nobody ever explained to you, hit that subscribe button. Because that's exactly what this channel is here for. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.